SMCI went on one of its biggest runs over the past year in the last 48 hours, running into 67 overall dollars. Pretty crazy. Now, over the past 48 hours, it's also dipped back down towards 59. Everyone's asking, should I buy? Should I do this? But the real thing is next week is going to be your make or break, just to let you know. And I'm telling you right now, the articles are already coming in that people aren't having the faith that they thought was going to happen, and that this might have just been shorts trying to cover. When you look at the chart overall, you can also see it's clear as day where you're at. You can see your previous low here. You came right into it. You're rejecting your $67. Now, I'm not going to say that you can't go higher, because I do think it is possible for you to continue this run. But going into next week, you have to understand what's coming will define everything for the company. Now, today we're also going to be going into AMD, a little bit into Nvidia and some other semiconductors. So let's jump right into it. The first thing I want to talk about here is, again, SMCI. Now, obviously off of SMCI, you're seeing a massive, really nice run, shorts covering across the board. But what you have to understand is that going into next Tuesday, that's when you get your potential NASDAQ delisting. I've seen people comment here regarding the NASDAQ delisting. No, you have not been delisted from the NASDAQ. I don't care what anyone says. It's right here. You can go read all the articles you need to. Now, again, they put this off literally since like last September, last August. They're trying to get it done. We'll see if they do. Again, this is for June 30th and then up into most recently as well for the data and everything on the financial side of the company. So it's very important that you're waiting for this, right? Especially if you're going into this with like a longer term perspective. SMCI has to provide their 10K, their 10Q. They have to provide all this information. And I will say, they've literally put it off like 5 times now. So I wouldn't be betting heavy on this. Okay. I'm just saying, do whatever you want. Risk reward, whatever you want to do, that is your money. You do what you got to do. But I'm telling you right now, very volatile move. And I promise you, if they do not release the data, or if it's skewed, or it's not what they are requesting that they need to be providing, you will dump and you will tank back below 44, most likely back down towards 36, maybe even below 30. So be on the lookout, be watching. Now, I also want to be talking about what's happening with semiconductors here, because semis are in a very, very interesting position. AMD is getting a lot of hype here, and I don't think AMD is the greatest name out there. But I'm trying to go over viewpoints of how could I maybe be wrong on AMD? Am I maybe missing something? And maybe I'm just looking, I'm comparing it maybe too much to Nvidia. It's competitors, right? So I was reading an article today. And again, I don't think you can make your bullish viewpoint on a stock by just excluding comparing it to competitors. That's not like a bullish thesis. You have to have an overall long-term viewpoint. Now, when you compare their numbers to others, it's just not there. They think almost 100% of the drop we've seen in the stock price since last March has come basically due to the revenue numbers of some of their products. AMD bulls believe that the market should stop comparing the company's chips with Nvidia and focus on its data center growth and its competitive edge over other players like Intel. Now, I can agree that AMD has been taking market share from companies like Intel, and that was what carried AMD over the past year. If you look at AMD's stock price going back into last year, that's what did a lot of this heavy lifting. Go to the weekly so we can get a better look, right? That's what did all this. Like, in all actuality, you had decent earnings and then, consistently taking market share from Intel and smaller semiconductor companies, right? That just didn't have continued strength. And that's been the story. But the problem here is now they're saying, well, let's focus on data center growth. And yes, they have had some growth, but it's not coming back into the numbers. And that's where I always get stuck on. If you're having growth, your revenue should show. Like, your revenue should be a mirror of your overall growth. If you look at Palantir, you can hate it all you want. You can say it's overvalued, but they have growth. The revenue shows it. Nvidia, all these other companies as well, right? According to Goldman Sachs research, global data center demand could surge by up to 160% by 2030. And the US data centers are projected to use 8% of total power by 2030, up from 3% in 2022. McKinney estimates that adding the required U.S. capacity will need over $500 billion in infrastructure investment by the decade's end. Now, again, We're going about this the wrong way. That yes, there's enough to spread around that AMD's going to have to take some deals. I agree. But that being said, the rate in which AMD is growing is not following the competitors, which if you are an investor, you're looking at the field of who you can put your money into, and that's how you're investing. You don't see great companies and then a okay company that you can invest in and say, okay, I'd rather put money into the okay company than the company that's growing rapidly. And then the other prospective companies that are growing maybe a little bit slower, but still rapidly in comparison. So when I look at something like Nvidia, again, that's why I say, like, if I'm not going for Nvidia, I'd rather go for like the next top dog, like in cellular, like AR&M. I'd rather go for like Broadcom. I'd rather go for a TSM who's taking on more projects from Intel, taking on projects from AMD and manufacturing these chips for them. So again, that's where my head really goes when I look at this. And again, I think this is a loser's mentality, and this is really the bull case. And so again, I'm not just trying to nitpick it and be biased here based off of AMD, but it's important that you look at it from both sides. And maybe I'm missing something here, but when you're creating a bull thesis that is based upon, well, there's enough growth to go around and everyone else is going to need to get some of this as well. Well, it seems like the only people that are taking advantage and really being greedy here are Nvidia and AVGO. Those are your big dogs in this race right now. And again, if you don't believe me, the earnings tell you the story. Again, you guys are going to get dead tired of me going over earnings. But again, all you need to do is go back it up. Go look at the growth here. And you're like, well, 5.47, Tyler, and then now you're at 7. You're almost 50% up year over year based on the whole year. But you're really not. You're at the end of the day, you are not. You go back into 2023, you're at 5 billion. 5 billion. I mean, nothing changed here, right? You grew to 7, you grew to 6, you grew back down to 5. And the all actuality, nothing's happening. Nothing's changing. You're doing the same stuff and you're stuck in a rut. You may have periods to where you get some growth and go up, but you just kind of come back down. And that's their revenue right now. And that's not consistent. Again, you go look at the good names, right? And again, I've shown you Nvidia a million times. Look at AVGO earnings, right? Go look at ARM earnings, right? Those are the things that should get you excited here. 11 billion, right? Come out 12 billion, right? Just steady overall growth is what you want to see. It's not as much as Nvidia, but it's still overall growth continuously. And that's what you're going to have to see for a winner in this sector. Because you have to think of the other part of this too, is what happens to these companies when growth stalls. Because when growth stalls for Nvidia, it's going to stall for AMD. No investor in their right mind thinking, okay, Nvidia stopped growing, now it's time for AMD to grow. Nvidia is literally capitalizing on every aspect of the AI market and the chip space. So if Nvidia is not growing, the entire sector is going to get slammed. There is no alternate universe in which AMD goes up in the long run and grows financially versus Nvidia. There's no world in which that happens. So when you're looking at this, AMD, in my opinion, there's no world in which this is not the little bro to Nvidia. And people might get mad at that. People might not like it. It is what it is. That's just the reality in which you're in. That's just where you're at. So looking at that overall. Now, when I go down the list of other names, and I do think it's important that we understand where semiconductors are, because semis do look decent. And I will say, AMD, right now, this is the weekly chart, and you're clearly in a downtrend. If you can start breaking above $120, we can talk. Maybe you can start pushing back into 135. But for the time being, technicals aren't telling you to buy. Fundamentals aren't telling you to buy. It's not lining up. Again, the buy zone for me is near $100. Until then, sit on your hands. Do not touch this. You're going to get burned. There's better buys out there. Now, I look overall at the ETF of SMH. And again, this is like a really easy and clean chart for most people to watch, in my opinion. So really quickly, I'll get rid of the MAs here, the 100 and 200, which you're bouncing off of. Your big level is 256. And then you have another level here at around basically 260 to 262. Okay. And you're holding above 150 or 256, which is really surprising in my opinion. And today's action, you really got to see how you held there. You can go back and look at all the rejections that you had, but again, you can see how you held below. But again, you're finding buyers off that, which is still really interesting to see. Because again, you go down the list of names like AVGO, which has kind of been hurting. And I think AVGO is honestly at 224 being represented as a buying opportunity. Again, it's worth mentioning though that AVGO, TSM are going to continue to hurt in the short term as they're doing the Intel deal. We'll see who actually ends up coming up with more and how this gets split up. But if you don't know, basically, Intel is basically selling stake of parts of their business or controlled manufacturing to AVGO and TSM. And so that's why you're kind of seeing the pain on both those stocks right now. Still think they're both really good. But again, what I'd be watching. I'm also watching TSM to find a bottom, get back above 200 and start cooking. Again, a little bit of a downtrend here in the short term as well. Overall, in the long term, I don't think there's any real reason to be concerned. You're still clearly in a long-term uptrend. That's where you're at there. But semis still look really strong for where they're at. The other part here of things to consider and why I think semis have to be such a focus for investors right now or traders is number one, Nvidia is it's the dog in the race. Nvidia needs to get above 140.7, which I've talked about a lot, but it looks really good. Dan Ives was pretty big talking about what's happening with Nvidia and what's happening in China. So everyone right now is petrified and terrified that Donald Trump is going to hammer home tariffs, 25% on chips, everything happening there. And there is that fear. But in my opinion, I don't think chips are going to get hit that hard. I just don't think it's going to happen. And I think chips are going to continue to figure out a way to work around all these guidelines like they have been over the past 4 years of Biden, because Biden has continually tried to hammer down on chips, create restrictions, and Nvidia works around it and prints more on earnings, and everyone thinks they don't know how they do it, right? But again, Trump also said regarding the trade deal today, they asked, is it possible? Do they think this is going to be a standstill? They're just going to have a trade war? As far as making a trade deal, it's possible. It's possible. Trump did not describe the parameters of the potential deal, and any agreement would face significant obstacles, some of the president's own making. Trump has ratcheted up pressure on China with an additional 10% tariff on all imports to the country. Now, Dan Ives also went into this in his major CNBC talk. He's like, I'm in China. I'm talking to them. They're not worried about tariffs. It's not going to phase them in the short term. And again, consumers mainly pay the tariff. So again, until something really hurts them, they're not really that concerned. They were already in a bad situation as a whole. He said there's a little bit of competitiveness, but the relationship I have with President Xi is very good. And I would say it's a great one. Again, this is probably the strongest and the kindest you've heard Trump talk about China in regards to the trade war and what's happening here. I think they are going to get this figured out. And again, I don't think Trump wants to be in a trade war for his presidency. I also think he wants to not, and I think the way that he's doing this is he's trying to knock all this out as fast as possible to try to get the benefits going into the back half of his presidency, right? And I think he's doing this in literally rapidly. I mean, he literally just got in office back end of January. We're almost at the end of February, and I mean, if we look at what he's done quite a bit, whether you like him, hate him, whatever it may be, right? So again, I think he's figuring this out. I'm happy with where we're at. And again, I think Nvidia, I think semiconductors are a very hot part of the market. The problem though is that we get focused on the bad opportunities, right? Or we try to make money quick. And I think can you make money quick with Nvidia? 100%, right? But I don't think the goal should be to make a bunch of money off of getting lucky off of trash names. In the semiconductor space, you're already investing in large caps for the most part. AMD is a large cap name. Find the best opportunity. Look at the numbers because the numbers don't lie to you. And I am telling you, if the numbers slow down for Nvidia or AVGO too, you are going to get hit as a whole. AVGO and Nvidia are two of the top 5 holdings in the NASDAQ. If they get hit, everything's going to get hit. So you have to think about it from that viewpoint as well. On top of this right now, we talked a lot about Bob and what's happening there. We are also seeing Apple heat up as well. And Apple is getting into the semiconductor space as well. Now they're not manufacturing and doing the same stuff that what's happening with Nvidia and these other companies. But again, they're ramping up production for their new AI, iPhone, and all their capabilities going on in China. And I think that's going to be one of the biggest things to watch for this quarter is Apple's China sales and growth overall in the greater China's Republic, whatever it's called, right? That's going to be one of the biggest focuses of what's happening. And I'm very happy with overall growth. I'm happy with how these stocks are performing. I'm happy with the bounce back across the board. I don't know how you couldn't be happy with all the bounce back across the board. But again, the market looks incredible. The market looks strong. And the areas that you need to see the strength, which are primarily semiconductors as of right now, semiconductors and tech, right? That's what's carrying us. They are maintaining strength. And I want to show you something very quickly. Despite seeing weakness on some of your large Mag 7 names, right? You're seeing Meta, Facebook, dip down from 740 to basically 690. You're seeing Netflix dip down from 1,060 down to lows of 1,015, give or take, right? You're seeing weakness here. You're seeing Amazon also dipping from highs of 242, still going down to 222, okay? So you're seeing weakness on basically half of the Mag 7. Tesla as well, also getting hit down towards 350 and might come down to 341, the 100 SMA again, right? You're seeing weakness on these names, yet the NASDAQ is holding up basically at all-time highs. Qs and SPY are at all-time highs, despite half of the Mag 7 getting hit. That should tell you just how strong this market really is and how strong and how we're sitting up here right now. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm watching. What do you think happens when all the names start to move together and in sync? Again, you have to be paying attention. Big opportunities out there. Follow for more content. See you guys tomorrow.